The Battle That Made the Galaxy Fear Earth. Part 5. The largest battle in human history began with a simple order. Admiral Grace Porter looked at her tactical display, studied the enemy formation, and spoke two words that would change the galaxy forever. All ships. Attack. 50 human warships surged forward against 300 Varth vessels. The odds were still terrible, but something had changed. The Varth had spent 3 weeks chasing ghosts. They had lost ships and supplies, and most importantly, confidence. Now they faced a human fleet that was fresh, angry, and led by the most dangerous commander their species had ever produced. Nina Cole pushed the horizon to maximum speed. The old ship groaned under the strain but kept flying. After 3 weeks of guerrilla warfare, Nina knew the Varth formation better than Zorvak himself. She knew where the weak points were. She knew which commanders were aggressive and which were cautious. She shared everything with Admiral Porter. Porter listened to every detail and incorporated it into her strategy. She did not waste time on pride or politics. She saw a junior officer who had valuable intelligence, and she used it. That was why she had never lost a battle. The two fleets met in a storm of fire and death. Human ships wove through the Varth formation, using tactics from every era of Earth's military history. They used flanking maneuvers from ancient cavalry charges. They used ambush techniques from jungle warfare. They used coordinated strikes that required split-second timing and absolute trust between crews. The Varth had never faced anything like it. They were used to enemies who fought in predictable patterns, who formed lines and traded fire until one side broke. Humans did not fight like that. Humans fought like they had nothing to lose and everything to prove. High Counselor Ravan watched the battle from a galactic assembly observation ship at the edge of the system. He was an old being with silver scales and eyes that had witnessed the rise and fall of many species. He had come to watch the humans die. Instead, he was watching them win. On the Dominance, Admiral Zorvik screamed orders at his officers. His fleet was being torn apart by an enemy a fraction of its size. Ships that had never known defeat were exploding all around him. His carefully maintained formation had dissolved into chaos. He had underestimated the humans. He had thought they were children playing at war. Now he understood the truth. Humans were not children. They were wolves wearing sheep's clothing. They had hidden their fangs until the perfect moment. Nina guided the horizon through the heart of the battle. She had a target in mind. The Dominance was the key to everything. Kill the head and the body would fall. Commander, Kevin Shaw called out, "The Dominance is heavily shielded. We cannot penetrate their defenses with our weapons." Nina had already thought of that. She did not intend to use weapons. "Open the hangar doors," she ordered. "Tell Sergeant Kent to prepare her Marines." Shaw stared at her. "Commander, you cannot be serious. A boarding action on the Varth flagship?" Nina smiled grimly. "They do not expect it. That is exactly why it will work. The horizon raced toward the Dominance. Voreth ships tried to intercept, but Lucy Vance and the Defiant cut them off. Porter had assigned the surviving original ships to support Nina's assault. It was a gesture of respect. The officers who had started this fight would be the ones to finish it. The horizon dove toward the Dominance's hangar bay at full speed. At the last moment, Nina cut the engines and let momentum carry them forward. The ship crashed through the hangar shields and skidded across the deck in a shower of sparks and fire. The impact threw Nina from her chair. She tasted blood in her mouth, but forced herself to stand. Through the view screen, she could see Varth soldiers rushing toward the ship. Behind her, she heard the thunder of Marine boots as Sergeant Kent led her team down the boarding ramp. Nina grabbed a weapon and followed them. She was a commander, not a ground fighter, but this was not the time for protocol. This was the time for action. The fight through the Dominance was brutal and bloody. The Vorath fought with desperate fury, knowing that their admiral was at stake. The humans fought with something stronger than desperation. They fought with the memory of everyone they had lost. Nina lost track of time. She moved from corridor to corridor, firing at anything that moved. Around her, Marines fell and rose and fell again. The deck was slick with blood from both species. Finally, they reached the bridge. Sergeant Kent blew the doors open with explosives, and the Marines poured through. Inside, Admiral Zorvik stood surrounded by his personal guard. He was holding a weapon, but he did not fire. He looked at Nina with his 4 eyes. She was covered in blood and ash. Her uniform was torn. Her hands were shaking with exhaustion. But she was still standing. Why? He asked. His voice was quiet, almost curious. Why did you come here? Why did you fight so hard for a species that is not your own? You humans are young and weak. You had nothing to gain and everything to lose. Nina stepped forward. Her weapon was aimed at his chest. You would not understand, she said. Try me. She thought about Kethany Prime, about 17 billion gentle souls who had never hurt anyone. About the children she had seen on the refugee ships, terrified and crying for parents they would never see again. About the bodies floating in space, victims of a war they had never asked for. We did not come here because we had something to gain, she said. We came here because they needed help. Because someone had to stand up and say that this is wrong. Because that is what humans do. We protect people who cannot protect themselves. Even when it costs us everything. Zorvik stared at her. He had conquered 37 worlds. He had defeated hundreds of enemies. But he had never met one who fought for reasons he could not understand. Surrender, Nina said. Order your fleet to stand down. This ends now. For a long moment, Zorvik did not move. Then, slowly, he lowered his weapon. He spoke into his communicator and gave the order. Across the system, Vorath ships stopped firing. The battle was over. The humans had won. 3 months later, Nina stood on the surface of Kethany Prime. She wore a new uniform with captain's insignia on her collar. Around her, thousands of Kethany had gathered for a memorial ceremony. The Kethany had built a wall of stone in the heart of their capital city. Carved into its surface were the names of every human who had died in their defense. The crew of the Resolute, the Marines who had fallen in boarding actions, Captain Damon Price, who had succumbed to his wounds 2 weeks after the battle ended. High Counselor Ravan had traveled to attend the ceremony. He stood beside Captain Nina Cole and watched the Kethany place flowers at the base of the wall. The galaxy will not forget what you did here, he said. You have changed everything. Species that never considered resistance are now talking about standing up to tyrants. The Vorath Dominion is in chaos. Their empire is crumbling because you showed the universe that they can be beaten. Nina did not respond. She was reading the names on the wall. Each one represented a life, a family, a story that had ended too soon. A young Kethany girl approached her. It was Tella, the communications officer who had broadcast their victories to the resistance. She had become a symbol of her people's courage. Captain Cole, Tella said, "May I ask you something?" Nina knelt down to meet her eyes. Of course, why did you come? When everyone else ran away, why did the humans come to save us? Nina thought about her answer carefully. She remembered what Captain Price had told her on that first day, when they had turned their ship toward impossible odds. She remembered the choice they had made and why they had made it. Because someone had to, she said. And we were there. Tella reached out and took Nina's hand. Her 6 limbs were warm against Nina's skin. Thank you, she whispered. Nina stood and looked at the wall one more time. The names blurred as tears filled her eyes. She did not wipe them away. These tears were earned. Behind her, The sun set over a world that still existed because 63 humans had refused to surrender. Above her, the stars shone with the light of a galaxy that would never forget the day it learned to fear Earth, not fear their weapons, not fear their technology, fear their courage, fear their stubborn refusal to accept that any cause was truly lost, fear the species that would cross the universe to protect strangers. Fear humanity. The battle that made the galaxy fear Earth. Part 4. 3 weeks had passed since the Horizon first arrived at Cathany Prime. 3 weeks of constant fighting, constant running, constant death. The 4 human ships had become legends, but legends do not stop bullets. Nina Cole stood on the bridge of the Horizon and stared at the empty space where the Resolute used to be. The ship was gone. 200 crew members were gone. Commander Gary Dunn was gone. They had died protecting a convoy of refugee ships, holding the line until the civilians could escape. The Vorath had overwhelmed them with sheer numbers. Captain Price had been badly wounded in the same battle. A piece of shrapnel had torn through his side when a Vorath torpedo breached the hull. Dr. Holt had saved his life, but he could not command anymore. He lay in the medical bay, drifting in and out of consciousness, while his ship continued to fight. Nina was in command now. She had dreamed of having her own ship someday, but not like this. Not standing in the blood of her mentor. Not carrying the weight of 63 lives on her shoulders. Lieutenant Kevin Shaw approached her carefully. "Commander," he said, "we have received a message from Admiral Zorvac. He is offering terms." Nina felt cold fury rise in her chest. "Put it on the screen," she ordered. Zorvac's face appeared before her. He was calm and confident, 4 eyes studying her with something like amusement. "You have fought well, human," he said. "Better than any species I have ever conquered. But this battle is over. Your resources are exhausted. Your ships are damaged. Your people are dying for nothing." He leaned forward slightly. "I am offering you mercy. Surrender now, and I will allow your remaining ships to leave this system. You may return to Earth with your lives. Continue fighting and I will destroy you completely. There will be no survivors, no one to tell your story. Your species will not even know what happened to you." Nina listened to his words. She understood the logic behind them. The Vorath were not stupid. They knew that the longer this fight continued, the worse they looked to the galaxy. A quick surrender would let them return to their conquest without further embarrassment. She also understood something else. Zorvac was not offering mercy because he was kind. He was offering it because he was afraid. Not of losing the battle. The Vorath would win eventually, but of what the humans were doing to his reputation. Every day this fight continued. More species across the galaxy wondered if the Vorath were really as invincible as they claimed. Nina looked around the bridge at her exhausted crew. They had dark circles under their eyes. Their uniforms were torn and stained. Some of them had bandages covering wounds that had not fully healed. They had given everything they had. She thought about the Resolute. She thought about Gary Dunn, who had loved old Earth poetry and told terrible jokes. She thought about the 200 souls who had died so that refugee ships could escape. If she surrendered now, their deaths meant nothing. She opened a channel to the other 2 ships. Lucy Vance appeared on one screen, Hannah Blake on another. They looked as tired as Nina felt. "You heard the offer," Nina said. "I wanted to give you the chance to discuss it before I respond." Vance laughed bitterly. "Discuss what?" "Whether we should abandon 17 billion Cathany to slavery and death. Whether we should spit on the graves of everyone we have lost." Blake nodded in agreement. "We did not come here to make deals with monsters. We came here to fight. If we leave now, we prove them right about us. We prove that humans only care about ourselves." Nina felt pride swell in her chest. She turned back to Zorvac's image on the screen. "Admiral," she said. "I appreciate your offer, but I am afraid I must decline. We are not leaving until this is over." Zorvak's expression did not change, but something flickered in his eyes. "You are choosing death," he said. "No," Nina replied. "We are choosing to stand up. Maybe you do not understand the difference. Maybe your species has never had to make that choice. But humans have been fighting against impossible odds since we climbed down from the trees. It is what we do. It is who we are. She leaned forward. You can kill us. You probably will. But we will hurt you first. We will hurt you so badly that every species in this galaxy will know that the Varth can bleed. And that knowledge will spread. Other species will fight back. Other worlds will resist. You have built your empire on fear, Admiral. We are teaching the galaxy not to be afraid." Zorvak stared at her for a long moment. Then he ended the transmission without another word. Nina turned to her crew. They were all watching her. She saw fear in their eyes, but also determination. They were ready to follow her into hell. "All hands," she announced. "Prepare for combat. We have one chance left. One shot at changing this fight. We are going to take it." Her plan was desperate. She had been developing it since the battle began, hoping she would never have to use it. The idea was simple, but almost certainly fatal. They would attack the Dominants directly. Kill Zorvak and the Vorath command structure would collapse. Without their admiral, the fleet would fall into chaos. Getting close enough to strike would require flying through the heart of the Varth formation. It would require perfect timing and incredible luck. Most importantly, it would require someone willing to lead the charge, knowing they probably would not survive. Nina was willing. She was explaining the plan to Vance and Blake when the sensors detected something impossible. New contacts dropping out of faster than light travel. Dozens of them. Then hundreds. Kevin Shaw stared at his screen with wide eyes. "Commander," he said, his voice cracking. "Commander, those are human ships. 47 of them. Earth has sent the fleet." Nina felt her legs go weak. She grabbed the edge of her console to stay standing. On the view screen, she could see them now. Human warships of every class, from small destroyers to massive battleships. They had come. A new voice came over the communication channel. It was calm and confident and somehow familiar. "This is Admiral Grace Porter of the ESS Vanguard to all human vessels. We apologize for the delay. Command wanted to make sure we brought enough firepower." Lucy Vance let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "Grace Porter," she said. They sent Grace Porter. Nina had heard stories about Admiral Porter. She was 70 years old and had been fighting since she was 16. She had never lost a battle. She was the most decorated officer in the history of the Earth Fleet. Admiral Porter continued speaking. "I have reviewed your tactical logs, Commander Cole. Impressive work. You have bought us the time we needed to get here. Now let me show you how we finish this." On the Dominance, Admiral Zorvak watched the human fleet arrive. For the first time in 60 years of conquest, he felt genuine fear. The humans had not sent one ship to die. They had not sent 4. They had sent everything they had, and they had come to win. The battle that made the galaxy fear Earth. Part 3. The 4 human ships moved through the Cathani system like wolves hunting in a forest. They never stayed in one place for long. They never attacked the same way twice. They struck from darkness and vanished before the Vorath could respond. Captain Lucy Vance was everything that Nina Cole admired in a commander. She was 45 years old, with short black hair and eyes that missed nothing. She had grown up on a mining colony in the asteroid belt, where survival meant being smarter and faster than everyone else. She brought that same ruthless intelligence to every battle she fought. The 4 captains met through secure video link to plan their next move. Price sat in his command chair, looking tired but determined. Vance leaned forward with eager energy. Captain Dennis Moore of the Resolute stroked his gray beard thoughtfully. Captain Hannah Blake of the Valiant listened quietly with her arms crossed. "We have hurt them," Price said. "But we have not stopped them. The Vorath ground forces are still advancing across the planet. Millions of Kethani have already been killed or captured. We need to do something bigger." Nina had been working on a plan since the other ships arrived. She shared her screen with the other tactical officers. "There is a Vorath communications hub on the third moon," she explained. "It coordinates all fleet movements and broadcasts propaganda to occupied territories. If we take it offline, we blind them temporarily. But I have a better idea." She zoomed in on the hub. "Instead of destroying it, we capture it. We use their own equipment to broadcast to the galaxy. We show everyone what the Vorath are really doing here. We show them the massacres, the slave pens, the children being torn from their parents. We make the galaxy watch." Vance smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "I like it," she said. "Nothing motivates politicians like public embarrassment. If we can make this ugly enough, maybe some of the neutral species will start helping." Commander Gary Dunn from the Resolute raised a concern. "That hub will be heavily guarded," he said. "Taking it will require boots on the ground. We are talking about a boarding action against a fortified position." Sergeant Paula Kent appeared on the video link from the Defiant. She was the leader of the Marine squad that served on Vance's ship. She had a scar running down her left cheek and eyes that had seen too much death. "My team can do it," she said. "Give us a distraction, and we will get inside." The plan came together over the next 6 hours. The Horizon and Valiant would create a diversion by attacking a Vorath patrol group on the far side of the system. While the enemy was distracted, the Defiant and Resolute would approach the moon and deploy their marine teams. Nina watched the clock as the operation began. She had seen combat before, but this was different. This was not just about winning a battle. This was about changing the story. The galaxy believed that the Vorath were unstoppable. Today, 4 human ships were going to prove them wrong. The diversion worked perfectly. The Horizon and Valiants swooped in on the patrol group and tore through their formation like fire through dry grass. The Vorath were good fighters, but they were trained for conventional warfare. They formed lines and exchanged fire at distance. They did not know how to handle enemies who got close and stayed there. On the third moon, Sergeant Kent led her Marines through the outer defenses of the communications hub. The Vorath guards were not expecting an assault. They had grown comfortable in their certainty that no one would dare attack them. That comfort made them slow. Kent kicked open a door and came face to face with a Vorath soldier. He was tall with thick armor and a weapon that could have vaporized her from across a room. But he was not ready for a human who closed the distance in 3 steps and drove a combat knife into the gap between his helmet and chestplate. The Vorath fought with energy weapons designed to kill from far away. They had never faced an enemy that preferred to fight close enough to smell their fear. The Marines moved through the hub like a nightmare, room by room, leaving Vorath bodies behind them. Kent reached the main control center and found it defended by 20 Vorath soldiers. She had 8 Marines left. The odds were bad, but she had faced worse. Flash grenades, she ordered. "Then we go in hard." The grenades went off with a blinding light. The Marines charged. In the close confines of the control room, the Vorath could not use their superior weapons effectively. The fight became a brutal struggle of fists and knives and pure determination. When it was over, Kent stood among the bodies with blood running down her face. Only 5 of her Marines were still standing. But the control room was theirs. "We have the hub," she reported. Ready to broadcast. Nina had prepared the footage herself. She had collected every scrap of evidence from the Horizon sensors, from Kethani distress signals, from intercepted Vorath communications. She had edited it into a package that showed the truth without mercy. the galaxy saw Vorath soldiers executing unarmed civilians. They saw children being separated from their parents and loaded onto slave transports. They saw beautiful Kethani cities reduced to smoking rubble. They saw the faces of the victims, each one a person with a name and a family and dreams that would never come true. The broadcast lasted 12 minutes. By the time it ended, 3 billion beings across the galaxy had seen it. News networks picked it up and spread it further. Protests erupted on a dozen worlds. Politicians who had ordered retreats suddenly faced angry crowds, demanding action. Admiral Zorvak watched the broadcast on the bridge of the Dominance. His 4 eyes narrowed with cold fury. He had conquered many species, but he had never been humiliated like this. The humans had turned his victory into a scandal. His communication officer interrupted his thoughts. "Admiral, we are receiving orders from the High Command." Zorvak read the message and felt his rage grow hotter. The High Command wanted him to pause the conquest. They wanted him to focus all his resources on destroying the human ships. For the first time in 800 years, a Vorath campaign had been interrupted because of enemy resistance. "Find those ships," Zorvak ordered. "Find them and destroy them. I want their captains brought to me alive. I want them to suffer before they die." But finding the humans was not easy. They had disappeared again, slipping away through the debris and asteroid fields that littered the system. They were out there somewhere, watching, waiting, planning their next attack. On Kethani Prime, Tella watched the broadcast on a small screen in her basement hideout. She wept as she saw the evidence of her people's suffering displayed for the galaxy. But she also felt something she had not felt since the invasion began. Hope that the humans were not just fighting. They were winning. Not the battle for the planet. Not yet. But the battle for attention. The battle for sympathy. The battle to make the galaxy care. Tella began organizing the survivors around her. If the humans could fight, so could the Kethani. They had no weapons and no training, but they had knowledge of their own world. They could sabotage. They could spy. They could make the Vorath occupation as painful as possible. The resistance was born in that basement, inspired by 4 ships that refused to surrender. And across the galaxy, other species watched and wondered if maybe they had underestimated the humans after all. The battle that made the galaxy fear Earth, Part 2, The Horizon, dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kethani system, and Nina Cole felt her heart stop. She had seen images of the Vorath fleet in training simulations. She had studied their ships in tactical briefings. But nothing had prepared her for the reality. 300 warships hung in the darkness like a wall of death. They were massive vessels with dark holes and red lights that glowed like angry eyes. Behind them, the pale blue planet of Kethani Prime floated helplessly. Between the fleet and the planet, Nina could see the scattered remains of the Kethani defense stations. They had been destroyed so completely that only dust and twisted metal remained. Captain Price stood at the center of the bridge with his hands clasped behind his back. His face showed no fear, even though fear would have been reasonable. "Report," he ordered. Kevin Shaw studied his sensors. 312 Vorath warships confirmed, he said. They have established a complete blockade around the planet. I am detecting multiple Vorath landing craft on the surface. The invasion has already begun. Dr. Holt pointed at something on her screen. "Captain, I am picking up distress signals. Dozens of them. The Kethani are trying to evacuate civilians, but the Vorath are shooting down their transport ships." Nina watched her tactical display as a Kethani refugee ship tried to slip through the blockade. It was a small vessel, probably carrying a few hundred civilians. A Vorath cruiser turned lazily toward it and fired a single shot. The refugee ship vanished in a flash of light. Price closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them again, they were hard as stone. "All hands to battle stations," he ordered. "We are going in. Nina had already started working on a plan. "Sir," she said, "we cannot fight them directly. But we do not have to. I have been studying the Varath formation. They are positioned for a siege, not a battle. They do not expect anyone to attack them." She pulled up a display showing the debris field from the destroyed Kethany stations. "If we run silent and drift in with the debris, we can get close without being detected. The Vara supply convoy is positioned at the rear of the fleet. They are not expecting an attack from that direction." Price nodded slowly. "What do you have in mind, Commander?" Nina highlighted 12 supply ships on the display. "We hit these targets fast and hard. We destroy them before the Varath know what is happening. Then we disappear before they can respond. We make them think there is a larger force out here. We make them paranoid." Kevin Shaw grinned despite the danger. "Guerrilla warfare in space," he said. "I like it." Price gave the order, and the horizon went dark. They shut down all unnecessary systems and let the ship drift into the debris field. For 2 hours, they floated in silence among the remains of the Kethany defense stations. Nina watched the Varath fleet through passive sensors, counting ships and measuring distances on the surface of Kethany Prime. A young communications officer named Tella huddled in the basement of a destroyed building. She was small even by Kethany standards, with 4 arms wrapped tightly around her 2 working limbs. The other 2 arms had been broken when the Varath bombed her city. Tella had been monitoring communications since the invasion began. She had heard the Galactic Assembly order everyone to abandon her world. She had heard the last desperate pleas of her government before they went silent. She had accepted that her species was going to die. Then she heard something impossible. A human voice, faint and full of static, speaking on an encrypted channel. "This is the ESS Horizon to any surviving Kethany forces. We are here to help. Do not lose hope." Tella stared at her equipment. 1 ship. The humans had sent 1 ship against 300. It was insane. It was suicide. But it was something. Someone cared enough to try. In space, the horizon drifted closer to the Varath supply convoy. Nina watched the enemy ships grow larger on her screen. Her hands were steady on her console, even though her heart was pounding. Now, Price ordered. The horizon came alive. Engines roared to full power. Weapon systems locked onto targets. In the space of 3 minutes, the small human ship destroyed 12 Varath supply vessels. Explosions lit up the darkness as fuel and ammunition cooked off in spectacular fireballs. By the time the Varath warships turned to respond, the horizon was already gone. It had vanished back into the debris field like a ghost. Admiral Zorvek stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominance, and stared at the destruction. He was a tall creature with gray skin and 4 eyes that saw in every spectrum of light. He had commanded Varath fleets for 60 years. He had conquered 37 worlds. He had never seen anything like this. "Report," he demanded. His tactical officer looked confused. "1 ship, Admiral. Sensors indicate a single human vessel. It struck the convoy and retreated before our forces could engage." Zorvek felt something he had not felt in decades. Not quite fear, more like curiosity. The humans had sent 1 ship to challenge his fleet. Either they were brave or they were stupid. Probably both. "Find them," he ordered. "Destroy them." The Varath ships began searching the debris field. But the horizon was already moving, slipping through the wreckage like a fish through water. Nina had studied the debris patterns for hours. She knew where to hide and when to move. Over the next 12 hours, the horizon struck again and again. They destroyed sensor platforms. They ambushed patrol ships. They rescued 2 refugee transports that had been trapped near the planet. Each time, they vanished before the Varath could catch them. telebroadcast every victory to the underground resistance networks. Across Cathay Prime, people who had given up hope began to believe again. The humans were fighting for them. One tiny ship against an empire, and the empire was bleeding. Then the sensors on the horizon detected something new. 3 contacts dropping out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. Human contacts. Nina felt tears in her eyes as she read the identification codes. The E's defiant. The S resolute. The S valiant. The other 3 human ships in the sector had come. A familiar voice crackled over the communication channel. "This is Captain Lucy Vance of the Defiant. Sorry we are late, Damon. Traffic was terrible. You did not think we would let you have all the glory, did you?" Price laughed. It was the first time Nina had heard him laugh in days. "Lucy, you old troublemaker. Welcome to the party. 4 ships." They were still outnumbered 75-1. But they were not alone anymore. And as the 4 human vessels linked their tactical systems and began coordinating their next attack, Admiral Zorvek felt that strange sensation again. Not fear. Not yet, but something close. The ghost ships had multiplied, and the hunt was just beginning. The battle that made the galaxy fear Earth, Part 1. The year was 2347, and humanity had been part of the Galactic Assembly for only 50 years. In a galaxy filled with species that had traveled between stars for thousands of years, humans were considered children. They were tolerated, but never respected. The older civilizations looked at Earth the way adults look at a noisy toddler at a dinner party. They smiled politely and waited for the humans to grow up or go away. Commander, Nina Cole stood on the bridge of the ESS Horizon and stared at the message on her screen. She had read it 3 times already, but the words still did not feel real. Cathay Prime was under attack. The Vorath Dominion had come. Everyone in the galaxy knew about the Vorath. They were conquerors. They had built their empire by crushing every species that stood in their way for 800 years. No one had ever defeated them. No one had even come close. When the Vorath wanted a world, they took it. When they wanted a species to serve them, that species served or died. Captain Damon Price walked onto the bridge with heavy steps. He was 53 years old, with gray hair and tired eyes. He had served in the Earth Fleet for 30 years and had seen many terrible things. But the look on his face told Nina that this was different. "The Galactic Assembly has made their decision," he said. His voice was quiet and flat. "They are ordering all member species to withdraw from the Cathay system. The Vorath fleet is too large. They say resistance is pointless." Nina felt her stomach turn cold. "How many Cathay are on that planet?" she asked. 17 billion, Price answered. Nina had met the Cathay before. They were gentle creatures with 6 limbs and soft blue skin. They had no military. They had never fought a war in their entire history. They were traders and artists and scientists. They made beautiful music and welcomed strangers with open arms. The idea of the Vorath slaughtering them made Nina want to scream. Lieutenant Kevin Shaw looked up from his weapons console. He was young, only 24, with bright eyes that had not yet learned to hide their emotions. "What happens to the Cathay if everyone leaves?" he asked. Price did not answer. He did not need to. Everyone on the bridge knew what the Vorath did to conquered species. Those who were useful became slaves. Those who were not became examples. Dr. Mara Holt stepped forward from her station near the back of the bridge. She was the ship's medical officer and had spent years studying alien biology. She had friends among the Cathay. Her voice shook when she spoke. "We cannot just leave them to die," she said. "There has to be something we can do." Price looked around the bridge at his crew. The Horizon was a good ship with a good crew, but it was just one vessel. Intelligence reports said the Vorath had brought 300 warships to Cathay Prime. 300 against 1. Those were not odds. Those were a death sentence. Nina watched her captain's face. She had served under Price for 7 years. She knew him better than she knew her own family. She could see the war happening behind his eyes. Part of him wanted to follow orders. Part of him wanted to do what was right. Those two things were not the same today, sir. Nina said carefully. The assembly did not order us to leave. They ordered us to withdraw. That order came from the assembly, not from Earth Command. Price looked at her with something like hope in his eyes. What are you suggesting, Commander? Nina took a deep breath. I am suggesting that we have some freedom in how we interpret that order. The assembly wants us gone because they believe the situation is hopeless. But hopeless is not the same as impossible. If we go to Kethany Prime, we might not save everyone. We might not save anyone. But we would be doing something instead of nothing. Kevin Shaw stood up from his console. His young face was pale but determined. I did not join the fleet to run away from bullies, he said. I joined to protect people who cannot protect themselves. If we leave those 17 billion Kethany to die without even trying to help, then what are we? One by one, the bridge crew spoke up. They all said the same thing in different words. They wanted to fight. They knew the odds were terrible. They knew they would probably die. But they wanted to try. Price listened to them all. When the last voice fell silent, he smiled. It was a sad smile, but it was real. He turned to the navigation officer. Set course for Kethany Prime, he ordered. Maximum speed. The navigation officer hesitated for just a moment. Then she entered the coordinates. The stars on the view screen blurred as the horizon jumped to faster than light speed. Nina moved to stand beside her captain. She spoke quietly so only he could hear. Do you really think we can make a difference? She asked. 4 Earthships in this sector against 300 Varth warships. Those numbers do not favor us. Price watched the swirling lights of faster-than-light travel on the screen. No, he admitted. They do not. But I have been thinking about something my grandmother told me when I was a boy. She survived the food riots of 2089. She said that when everything looks hopeless, that is when it matters most what you choose to do. Not because you will win, but because your choice shows who you really are. He turned to face Nina directly. The galaxy thinks humans are children, he continued. They think we are weak and foolish and not worth their attention. Maybe they are right. Maybe we will fly to Kethany Prime and die in the first 5 minutes of battle. But at least we will die standing up. At least we will die trying to help. And maybe that matters. Maybe someone will remember that when the whole galaxy ran away, the humans stayed. Nina felt tears burning in her eyes, but she did not let them fall. She was a commander in the Earth Fleet. She had a job to do. She nodded once and returned to her station. The horizon raced through the void between stars. Behind them, the rest of the galaxy was retreating. Diplomats sent messages of condolence to the Kethany government. News networks prepared sad stories about another species that would soon be gone. Everyone accepted that Kethany Prime was lost, but aboard one small ship, 63 humans refused to accept anything. Kevin Shaw ran final checks on the weapon systems. Dr. Holt prepared the medical bay for casualties. The engineering team pushed the engines harder than they were designed to go. Everyone moved with purpose and determination. Nina Cole sat at her tactical console and began planning. She studied everything the fleet knew about the Varth. She looked for weaknesses, patterns, anything that might give them an advantage. She knew that one ship could not defeat an empire, but one ship might hurt them. One ship might slow them down. One ship might buy time for refugees to escape. And if humans were going to die today, they were going to make sure the Varth remembered them. The horizon flew on through the endless dark, carrying 63 souls toward a battle that no one expected them to survive. Behind them, the galaxy watched and waited, certain that they were witnessing nothing more than a futile gesture. They were wrong.